All right, ready? Okay, wonderful. All right, hello everyone, good afternoon. We're very excited to be here. Thank you to my colleagues, Representative Crenshaw and Representatives Correa, as well as the chairs of the Congressional Psychedelics Advancing Therapies Caucus, Representatives Bergman as well, and the Drug Policy Alliance. We're very excited here today to really celebrate an enormous amount of progress that's being made in the study and advancement of psychedelic research and the applications of PTSD for our veterans communities as well as many other survivors across the country. The first time we introduced a bill to remove the barriers to studying the medical benefits of psychedelics, it failed by a lot, 331 to 91. And that was in 2019, 6 months into my first term, and one of my colleagues even came up to me and joked that this was just kind of an impossibility. But after that vote failed, many people across the country gathered and rallied and started to organize and contact their members of Congress. And offices were bombarded by phone calls and letters from veterans who knew how important studying these drugs were for addressing PTSD and supporting mental health treatment. So encouraged by their support, we tried again, and we tried again. And we tried again last year, and this time the amendment had passed the House. But now this year, with thanks to help from Representatives Crenshaw, Correa, and more, we don't even need to introduce an amendment because much of what we are fighting for has been put into the original bill text thanks to the hard work of our many members who supported our efforts on the House Armed Services Committee. We expect it to pass the House with full NDA legislation tomorrow, knocking on wood, we get that through, and we are so encouraged by this development. Psychedelics have shown so much promise. Initial trials of psilocybin show it being equally or more effective in treating depression with a much lower risk of overdose or addiction. We desperately need more resources to treat PTSD, traumatic brain injury and depression. At least 1 in 2 PTSD patients cannot tolerate or do not respond adequately to existing treatments. So while we are here to celebrate this legislative progress, I also want to acknowledge that we are not yet done. While we expect this psychedelic provision to make it through the House, we also expect it to encounter resistance in the Senate. So if you are at home, if you care about this legislation, I highly encourage you to contact your senator and let it be known your thoughts. But I know the power of this community to rise up and make itself heard, and I expect they will again. It is our moral responsibility as legislators to do everything we can to help members of our armed forces suffering from PTSD, as well as helping thousands of survivors of sexual assault, trauma, violence, and beyond. To knowingly refuse to enable research that could end millions of people's suffering is simply wrong. If we prohibit these promising drugs from being studied, we are being led by stigma, not science. And it is our veterans who will pay the price. Thank you so very much, and I will now turn it over to Representative Crenshaw to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for your leadership on this and bipartisanship. This is a really wild coalition, okay? You've got extremely conservative Republicans, moderate Republicans, you've got extremely progressive Democrats, moderate Democrats. Everybody's on the same page because there's a realization that these therapies are working. There's already some pretty solid studies, specifically on MDMA, that show just unbelievable outcomes. Massive reduction in PTSD symptoms. We need to keep replicating those studies. There's other drugs that show incredible promise. I was turned on to this issue because I had so many friends, either current or former service members, who were going down to a specific clinic and doing Ibogaine. One treatment of Ibogaine would cure them of addiction, cure them of their inner demons, their PTSD. They were balanced afterwards. And it was described to me more and more by people I really knew well and who I knew had seen trauma. And I said, we have to do something about this. We have to look at this more, research it the proper way, go through the proper FDA clinical trial studies. And that's how this was born. and put into the NDAA. You know, start with our service members, start with our veterans, but the possibilities are endless from there. There's promise on drug addiction. There's promise for victims of sexual trauma. What about law enforcement officers who deal with what they deal with every single day? There's a lot of people in our country that could use effective treatments that are feeling hopeless right now. That's why you're seeing this kind of bipartisanship. Now, there's going to be some questions on what exactly is getting passed, so I'll just go ahead and answer those real quick. There is an underlying bill that we're all co-sponsors of that I like. I have it on word of the speaker that we're going to continue to try and make sure that original language makes it into conference and makes it into the final NDAA passed by the president. I still have some concerns that what's currently in there does not fund what we wanted to fund in the DoD, nor does it exactly specify that these need to be clinical trials, just like our original bill that we worked on did. We're going to fix that. I have confidence that that will get fixed. You know why? Because I still can't find one member of Congress that is actually opposed to this. All right, the obstacles we have run into have largely been procedural at the staff level, but I still can't find one member of Congress who would say that they're against this. That's an amazing thing. I think that's why this will succeed. It should succeed. It's helped a lot of people already. You've seen me up here before bringing my fellow Navy SEALs, bringing former Army service members up here, talking about their testimonies and how this saved their lives. It's really incredible, and I'm really happy to be doing this and showing that, look, we can disagree on a lot up here, but when we find something we can't agree on, we just get it done. And that's what's happening today. We're really excited about that. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to my friend, Representative Correa.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say thank you to my colleagues for being here today. Was stated earlier, 2019, the first bill that Ms. Alexandria presented, 90 votes, ayes. Today, we're on the verge of success. This is so important. So critically important, not only for our veterans, but for our society. Let me tell you a story. I was at one of these caucus meetings with General Jack Bergman. There's probably a dozen SEALs there, veterans, all saying if it was not for this treatment, I would have probably taken my life. I was contemplating taking my life, then I found this treatment. And I asked them, I said, well, if it can't do it here, where did you get it done? Mexico, Costa Rica, other countries. Shameful. Shameful that the one thing that works for veterans is not legal in the United States. These veterans that fought for our country saw things that no human being should see. They come back to America and say, help us. And we say, no, it's against the law. Are you kidding me? This is the state of a bureaucracy called the federal government of the United States. And that's why we need to change how we do business in Washington. And let me say, this is not just about veterans. A few weeks ago, I was back home speaking to a medical professional, a neighbor who I'm not going to name. He's telling this individual this story that I just told you. And this person tells me, well, you know, Lou, I had trauma in my life a couple of years ago. And I may have turned to this for help. And this person says, and I may have been totally cured. But they can't come out and say what they've done because it's against the law. It's a healthcare professional. That is not, ladies and gentlemen, the way to run a country. The stigma placed on these possible medical solutions that work from the failed war on drugs is terrible. The cost this war on drugs keeps exhausting on our society is unacceptable. I want to thank my colleague from New York and other colleagues that are members of our syllabus caucus for their good work. Let's get busy. Thank you very much.
We'll take any on-topic questions. It's too hot for off-topic, so go for it.
Have you put any thought into
Yeah, you know, I think when it came to the original iteration of this bill when we first introduced it in 2019 was to really remove federal barriers to study writ large. And right now, the federal government has had barriers to funding or participating, supporting in any way the study of any Schedule I drug. And that has prevented the U.S. federal government from being able to obtain critical data around these drugs. So, you know, in terms of our goal for this, is that if we are able to engage in clinical study, we can use that information to make further decisions about whether this is something that we can develop further, whether something we can expand upon further. But right now our hands are tied in terms of getting the science that we need to make those decisions.
Right there. Was there any discussion about trying to do something moving forward to just reclassify it so it's not a Schedule I drug? Because wouldn't that also just remove all the barriers you're now facing when it comes to getting it for trials?
Right. Well, you know, I think that also speaks to kind of the chicken and egg situation that we are in. I think it would be very difficult for us to be able to advocate for declassification or reclassification without data around this. You know, these are powerful substances. I don't want to give short shrift to that, but what that means, but they also have powerful potential as well. And so with clinical study, with some of that application, we can understand exactly the contours of application and what circumstances are appropriate for that application and other circumstances where necessary, you know, if there are contraindications. And so, you know, I believe that when it comes to descheduling, rescheduling, once we get that data, we may start the road to that conversation, but that would be, you know, some time out, I believe. We need to get that data first.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yes.
Just wanted to say that think about the situation right now. I believe these veterans when they tell me 80% success rate. I believe these veterans when they say 80% success rate. We just have to show that data to the rest of the federal government in order to change the laws. I cannot believe that we're just sitting there saying, prove it to me, show it to me. Well, that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do, and that's why these studies are so important. Thank you.
Congresswoman, so I mean, NIH already has their own studies stating that, you know, when it comes to the psychedelics, it does considerably help with PTSD, and these studies have been out for some time. Considering the amount of years that you and your colleagues have put into this, how confident are you that you'll at least get more than just a basic majority to get this added to the end?
I do feel quite confident about this, and this has been, as you mentioned, years in the making. And as you also mentioned, while there is some progress and some preliminary results coming out of NIH, because of these kind of federal prohibitions, our ability to really deeply explore this venue in terms of scientific and medical development is very, very limited. But that being said, the stigma around these substances is very real, and we have encountered it here in this chamber for a long period of time. But there has been a sea change on this issue, and particularly a sea change around the idea that we should at least explore this scientifically. And so I do feel quite confident as far as that goes. Now there's a whole other question, there are whole other areas of debate where there is a lot of disagreement, such as rescheduling, etc. But I do believe that we have finally achieved consensus, bipartisan consensus, and agreement on the ability to study these substances.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank
you. Quickly,
you mentioned, we talked about Schedule I. Do you know how this would work with Schedule I? And how would the trial, I mean, just practically, how would it work?
Right. Well, the language is explicit in the NDAA. Right now, it is to allow within a defense context to be able to kind of pursue these kinds of studies explicitly within the base text of the bill. But when it comes to scheduling, that is, I think, a separate conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.